In 1994, the United States Air Force quietly started a classified program to build a machine that could throw a giant three-dimensional picture into the open sky. The paperwork called it a tool for special operations deception missions. That same year, a journalist in Quebec stood in front of a small crowd and told them the government was about to do something very specific: project the face of God across the whole planet, stage a fake alien invasion, use the panic to take over the world. One of those two stories got filed under crazy. The other one got filed under classified. I'm Carol Ann. Welcome to the InBetween. That man in Quebec was Serge Monast, and in 1994, he gave the plan a name: Project Bluebeam. He said it had 4 steps, was already underway, and when it was finished, every religion on Earth would be gone, every government folded into one, and the whole human race would kneel before a face in the sky that wasn't real. It didn't happen, not on his schedule anyway. His deadlines came and went, and the sky stayed empty. So for 30 years, Bluebeam lived where stories like it usually live, in the back rooms of late-night radio. And then, this past year, it strolled right out into the daylight. The government put up a website and started handing us its UFO files. And a whole lot of people who'd never heard the name Serge Monast started asking the same question he was asking 30 years ago. So here's what I want to do. I want to take Monast's plan seriously enough to pull it apart piece by piece and show you which parts are nonsense and which parts are real. Because crazy enough, some of them are. And then I want to get to the question that matters in 2026. Did Monast just get it wrong? Or did he accidentally hand over the blueprint? Stick with me, because before I'm done, there's one man, what happened to him I still can't explain, who spent his career standing next to every piece of this story. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, he walked out of his life and was gone. But before we can talk about him, we have to talk about Serge Monast. So who was Serge Monast? Well, believe it or not, he wasn't some basement-dwelling nut job. For most of his life, he was a working journalist and author in Quebec. He wrote poetry and essays, things that people actually liked to read. And then somewhere along the way, he went down a rabbit hole and didn't come back out for a long time. When he finally did, what he came back with was Project Bluebeam, a plan for the elites to take over the world. And he laid out exactly how it would go down. 4 steps. Step 1, you break people's faith in the old religions, and you do it with archaeology. Monast claimed they'd trigger engineered earthquakes in exactly the right spots around the world, and out of the rubble, they'd pull faked discoveries. Convenient new evidence proving that everything every church and every mosque ever taught you was wrong. You knock the floor out from under what billions of people believe all at once. Step 2 is the big one, the space show. Monast said they'd throw enormous 3-dimensional images up into the sky that would look like God himself coming down from the heavens. Holograms with sound beamed to different parts of the planet. Here's the clever part. Each region sees its own God. Over a Christian country, the image of Jesus. Over a Muslim one, Mohammed, and so on. Every crowd handed its own savior. Then slowly, all of them melt together into one. A single God for a single new world religion. Step 3, the voice. Monast said that they'd use low-frequency waves to drop a voice straight inside your head. No speaker, no radio, just a voice rising up from somewhere behind your own thoughts, so convincing you'd swear your God was speaking to you personally from the bottom of your own soul. And step 4, the grand finale. Monast gave a few versions of this one, but the headline is the one you've been feeling coming. While everyone is still reeling from God coming down from heaven, the Earth gets hit with a fake alien invasion. A staged threat from the stars, frightening enough that the nuclear powers of the world throw up their hands and surrender to one global authority that promises to keep everybody safe. And according to Monast, the people running the show would never once have to wonder whether that alien invasion was real. They'd know it wasn't because they'd be the ones who staged it. So, that's the plan. A sky full of false gods, a voice planted in every skull, and an invasion from outer space nobody up there ever launched. All of it to scare the human race into surrendering to one government with one set of hands on the controls. It's gigantic. It's completely insane. But will it work? Well, let's start by checking it piece by piece. We'll start with the easy part, the part where Bluebeam falls apart. Monast had dates. He said the plan was set for 1983, and then it slipped to 1995, then 1996, then surely by the year 2000. Well, here we are. The year 2000 came and went, so did the next 26. And in all that time, not one church has fallen, not one sky has cracked open with the face of God, and the dollar in your pocket, or lack thereof, is still, sadly, very much your earthly problem. Every deadline Monast ever gave us has come and gone with nothing to show for it. When a prophecy keeps moving its own finish line, that's kind of a big, bright red flag. Then there's the paperwork, or rather, the absence of it. Monast said that NASA, the United Nations, the militaries of the world, all of them were in on the plan for decades. A secret that big needs an army of people to keep it. The ones who built the holograms and the ones who signed the checks. And in 32 years, not one of those people has ever walked out a door with a single document. Not a memo, not a blueprint, nothing. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the government can keep a secret when it wants to. The Manhattan Project, for example. But a secret this big, with this many hands on it for this long, and nobody breathes a word? That's just not how people work. Somebody always talks. Now, if you came in a believer and you're feeling me chip away at all of this, give me a few more minutes before you click off. Because Bluebeam refuses to die for a reason. And it's a stronger one than any date on the calendar. We're getting there. But the question we need to tackle first is, where did Monast get his information? When somebody finally pinned him down on his sources, it wasn't a leaked file or a man on the inside. It was shortwave radio, late-night conspiracy broadcasts out of the States. The rest of his writing runs down the same worn groove, the same shadowy cabal secretly steering everything. In fact, one of his later works was openly patterned on the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a notorious forgery that has been used to smear Jewish people for over a century. Now, not interested in kicking a dead man, but it appears because it tells you about the type of story Bluebeam is. It's the oldest kind. The same grand conspiracy that gets recycled in every generation, just dressed up in newer technology. And there's one more thing about Monast himself, because the man's own story is part of why this won't die. He didn't get to grow old. In December of 1996, at 51, he died of a heart attack at home. Now, the believers will tell you a darker version. They'll tell you he was arrested, spent a night in a cell, and was dead within a day of getting out. Silenced for getting too close. And I get why that story has legs. A man who says the government is faking God, dropping dead the moment they lock him up? That writes itself. But the story has a hole in it. That whole timeline traces back to basically one source, a single obituary, and that obituary got his age wrong by 5 years. When the one document holding up your martyr can't get the man's age right, I can't sell it to you as fact. What's true is quieter and sadder. He lost custody of his kids that fall, and a few months later, his heart gave out. What's also true is that a martyr is the best thing that can happen to a theory like this. Dead men don't walk back their claims, and Bluebeam has been leaning on his grave ever since. But the thing that really takes the wind out of Bluebeam's sails, the part I didn't see coming when I started digging, is where the plan actually comes from. It comes from Star Trek.
Fascinating.
I'm not kidding. Back in the mid-1970s, Gene Roddenberry, the man who created Star Trek, sat down to write the very first Star Trek movie. The working title was The God Thing. And the plot goes like this. A craft comes toward Earth claiming to be God. It can appear to people as whatever they expect their God to look like. It puts a voice in their heads, and it turns out the whole thing is a fraud, an imposter wearing the face of the divine. Captain Kirk literally ends up taking a swing at a fake Jesus. The studio passed on it, but pieces of that idea kept surfacing for years in the later movies and in an episode of The Next Generation where a con artist uses holograms and fake disasters to pose as a planet's devil. So, the 4 beats of Project Bluebeam, the false gods in the sky, the voice in the head, the fraud behind it all were sitting in a Hollywood script almost 20 years before Monast ever stood up to give his talk. Which means either the New World Order borrowed its master plan from a rejected Star Trek movie, or a man hunting for a grand conspiracy found one at the video store. I'll let you decide which is more likely. And even if you wanted to build the thing for real, the physics just say no. You can't paint a solid 3-dimensional picture onto clear daytime sky. There's nothing up there to catch the light. Every working version of this we've ever managed, the floating concert holograms, the laser tricks, all of them need darkness, a flat surface like a pane of glass or plastic, and only works if you're looking at it from one specific angle. The voice in the head effect is real.
This is Jesus, Kent.
And you've been a very
naughty boy.
And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the honest version produces clicks and buzzes, not the Sermon on the Mount. To do what Monast described over the whole planet in daylight in every language at once, you would need physics we simply don't have. So, as a literal prediction on a literal timeline, Project Bluebeam is dead. The deadlines failed, the documents don't exist, and the plot was lifted from science fiction. If you came here for me to tell you that it's all coming true, I can't. So, why am I still talking about it? Because Serge Monast, nutjob that he might have been, built his fantasy out of real parts. Once you see them laid side by side, Bluebeam stops being funny. The oldest fear in the book is this.
Why did it have to be snakes?
That a government would stage a fake event to manipulate its own people. That's the part everyone waves away. They never do that. Except they almost did. In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officers in the United States, signed off on a plan called Operation Northwoods. The goal was to manufacture a reason to go to war with Cuba. Fake terror attacks on American soil. Fake the shoot-down of an American passenger plane. Pin it all on Castro. It was real. It was signed. And the only reason it didn't happen is President Kennedy said, "I don't think so." We know about it now because it was declassified in 1997. So the next time someone tells you that the government would never stage an attack on its own people to get what it wants, you can tell them it's already been typed up, signed, and filed. Now, Northwoods got shut down. And maybe that's a warm fuzzy, the idea that somebody's always standing there holding the net. But the holes in that net are huge. Look at one that fell right through, the Gulf of Tonkin. August 1964, the Navy reported 2 attacks on American destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin, and Congress turned that into the vote that opened the Vietnam War. The first one was absolutely real. The second one, the one they leaned on the hardest, maybe not so much. Bad radar, jumpy sailors, a storm. Everybody pretty much agrees this one almost certainly never happened. And the NSA's own files, declassified decades later, shows the intelligence got massaged just enough until a phantom attack looked solid. Historians will argue over whether that was a deliberate lie or a cover-up of an honest mistake, and that's a fair fight. But the result doesn't change. A war that killed millions started over an attack in the dark that never happened. 5 years later, in 1967, a report floated an even stranger idea that the best way to unite humanity and keep everyone in line would be to invent an outside threat, specifically an alien one. Now, the author later said the whole thing was satire, a joke, but the genie was out of the bottle, and people in serious rooms kept circling back to it, including, turns out, the most powerful man on the planet. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan stood up at the United Nations and mused out loud about how fast all of our differences would vanish if the world suddenly faced a threat from outside it, from aliens.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
He said versions of that same idea more than once. The leader of the free world at the world's podium describing the exact psychological trick at the heart of Monast's Step 4. No wonder underground bunker sales are off the charts. And then there's the technology, which is where it stops being funny. Remember the voice in your head? The microwave auditory effect is real. It's been in the scientific literature since the early 1960s. Pulse a microwave at a person's skull just right, and they hear a sound that seems to come from inside their own head. By the 1970s, researchers had pushed it far enough to send simple, recognizable words that way. And the United States Air Force holds patents, real patents with real numbers, on using that effect to, in their words, audibly communicate speech to a person. A voice in your skull, no radio required. Somebody owns that patent. Remember the God in the sky? I told you at the top about that 1994 Air Force program, the holographic projector built for battlefield deception. That part's real, and the Washington Post reported it. And during the first Gulf War, somebody at the Pentagon seriously pitched projecting a giant image of Allah over Baghdad to tell Iraqi soldiers to lay down their weapons. They shelved it, partly because the hardware was impossible, and partly because, and I love this, nobody could agree on what Allah was supposed to look like. But somebody pitched it, out loud, in a planning meeting. Right about here in my research, I started to feel like Rowdy Roddy Piper in They Live. You remember the 1988 John Carpenter movie? Our guy friend finds a pair of sunglasses, slips them on, and suddenly the billboards stop selling him vacations and start screaming, "Obey" and "Consume." And the people running things turned out not to be people at all.
Excuse me.
You know, you look like your head fell on the cheese dip back in 1957.
Carpenter meant it as a goofy B-movie. The problem is, half the stuff I just listed has a patent number or a declassified stamp on it. Those sunglasses don't feel quite so silly anymore. Anyway, back to the list. There's even the upper atmosphere piece. Up in Alaska, there's the facility called the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, that pumps energy into the ionosphere, literally making the sky glow. A faint, artificial green light, visible from the ground. Not a face, not a word, but a man-made glow in the sky, made on purpose. So, what do we have so far? A real plan to stage a fake war. A serious backroom proposal to invent an alien threat. A sitting president throwing the idea at the walls at the UN to see if it sticks. Patents for a voice inside your head with no speaker, and a classified program for a deceptive picture in the sky. Take any one of them alone, and it's a curiosity. Stack them all up next to a 1994 conspiracy theory, and the hair on your arms starts to lift. Because every ingredient in Monast's recipe turns out to be real with a paper trail somewhere. Now, here's where reality is knocking on the door. Real doesn't mean assembled. A patent for a voice effect isn't a planet-wide loudspeaker. A glowing patch over Alaska isn't the Sermon on the Mount hanging over 6 continents at once. The pieces are real. The finished machine Monast described is still science fiction. But if you ask me, The pieces being real at all is creepy enough. And now we reach the part that keeps Bluebeam alive in 2026. Because everything I just walked you through, Monast was dreaming up in 1994 with no internet and a shortwave radio budget. And believers have a list. For years now, just about every strange light in the sky has gotten the Bluebeam label slapped on it. In 2009, a glowing spiral unrolled over northern Norway, and the internet ran with it. Turned out to be a failed Russian missile spinning as it burned out. In 2011, a ball of light dropped down over the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, one of the most sacred spots on the planet, and the videos raced around the world overnight. That one was a flat-out hoax. Faked footage, a couple of cameras, and some editing. No projector, no hologram. Just a convincing video and millions of people who wanted to believe it. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because that's the whole theory in miniature. And it happened 15 years before anybody had the tools we've got now. Just look at what's on the shelf today. Drone swarms, not a handful of drones, light shows made of 10, 11,000 coordinated drones drawing sharp, moving pictures across the night sky. People film them constantly and post them as UFOs because what else would you think? Artificial video. The AI tools that have landed in the last couple of years can spit out fake footage so convincing that a watchdog group called NewsGuard found one of them producing believable fake news clips around 80% of the time. Fake video of Jesus in the clouds. Fake UFO footage. It's already out there, already pulling in millions of views. And then, just this past winter, we got a live test of the whole idea, and nobody had to build a single hologram to run it. Back in late 2024, thousands of mysterious lights started turning up over New Jersey and the East Coast. For weeks, nobody in charge could give a straight answer about what they were. A congressman went on TV, said they were drones, and blamed an Iranian mothership parked off the coast. The internet lost its mind. It was the Ghostbuster speech come to life.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
And the search term Project Bluebeam, this 30-year-old theory, went viral for the first time in its life, pulling millions of searches in a single weekend. Eventually, the government gave us the boring truth. Hobby drones, regular planes, a few misidentified stars. Take that for what it's worth. But here's what I want you to notice. There was no Bluebeam over New Jersey, no projector, no master plan, no machine. And it still worked. Take a jumpy country, add a few lights it can't explain, give it a feed to pour everything into, and inside a weekend, millions of people are convinced something engineered is hanging over their heads. You don't need the conspiracy to get the panic. The panic is already built into the world we live in. Which brings us, finally, to right now, to the website. In May of 2026, the Pentagon, which this administration renamed the Department of War, opened a page at war.gov/UFO. And on it, they started releasing the government's own files on unidentified objects in our skies. Photos, videos, old NASA imagery. Hundreds of files after 70 years of insisting there was nothing to see. The site pulled over 1 billion visits. For a lot of people, this was the day they'd waited for their whole lives. The day the truth finally started coming out. And I want you to hold two things in your head at the same time. The first is that this is genuinely remarkable. And most of it is probably exactly what it looks like. Old sighting reports finally seeing the daylight. The second is quieter, and it's the one Monast would have pointed straight at. For 70 years, the official position was that there was nothing to tell you. Now, all at once, the government is the one deciding what gets told and when and how it's framed. The files are curated. The timing is theirs. The story arrives pre-packaged. None of that means there's a false messiah behind the curtain. Every official review still says there's no sign of little green men. But it does mean something simple and a little scary. Whoever controls the reveal controls the story. And we just handed that job to the very people who spent 70 years swearing there was no story at all. Now, if you've been with us a while, something here might be tugging at you. Because not long ago, we spent a whole episode on a list of names. More than 10 scientists, engineers, and one retired Air Force general who, in the span of about 3 years, either walked out their front doors and were never seen again, or turned up dead with no good explanation. People who worked behind fences on some of the most hush-hush projects ever, like rockets, nuclear weapons, and anti-gravity. Now, the branch I'm about to walk out on is mighty thin, but when has that ever stopped me before? A plan like Monast's, if it were ever real, would need to stay buried. And the people most dangerous to it would be the ones who could spot the trick, because they helped build the parts. Maybe one or two of them got too close to what the disclosure was really for, or just knew too much about one piece of it. Now, hear me loud and clear. This is speculation. Capital letters, speculation. I don't have the evidence to back it, and I'm not going to pretend to. We're not making that claim. The threat is just there, sitting next to a much sadder possibility that some of these are private tragedies with nothing to do with any of this. But one name keeps drawing me in. General Neil McCaslin, a retired 2-star who spent his whole career inside the Air Force's most classified research. And the reason that I can't shake him is what that career was actually made of. Because if you wanted to build the machine that Monast described, the real one, you'd need 3 things. Something in orbit that can put energy and images where you want them. A way to get classified hardware up there without anyone asking questions. And research into how the human mind takes in what it's shown. McCaslin stood next to all 3. He worked the space-based laser program and commanded the lab at Kirtland Air Force Base, the beating heart of the Air Force's directed energy work. He spent close to a decade inside the National Reconnaissance Office's special projects, the office that launches the payloads with no names. And when he ran the Air Force's research laboratory, the 711th Human Performance Wing, the people who study human cognition itself, answered to him. One career brushing against every leg of the tripod. And his name turns up in the leaked emails of the people pushing for UFO disclosure. In February of 2026, he walked out of his house on foot, left his phone behind, and was gone. 8 days after the president told the Pentagon to start releasing the files. I'm only giving you the order things happen in. What you do with that is yours. Food for thought. So, where does that leave us? Well, the truth is, Project Bluebeam, as Serge Monast wrote it, isn't real. It's a 30-year-old fantasy that missed every deadline it ever set, left behind not one shred of paper, and turns out to have been written first as a Star Trek movie. If you came here wanting me to tell you that the fake Messiah arrives next Tuesday, I can't do it. The literal plan is dead, and I'm not going to dig it up just to fan the flames. But here's what 30 years did to Serge Monast's crazy little theory. It didn't come true, but it did come closer. Every piece of what he was raving about in 1994 is more real now than it was when he said it. The deception programs are documented. The voice in the skull patents exist. The drones are up there by the thousands. The fake video is good enough to fool your own eyes, and the government is now sitting at the controls of the one thing Monast cared about most: the reveal. What you get shown, when it's shown, and wrapped inside which story. And that's the point, the thing I really want you to carry out the door. Serge Monast was afraid of one giant switch thrown by one hidden hand, one evil plan cooked up by one secret room. He had it exactly backwards. The real danger in 2026 is the opposite picture. Every tool he described, the drones, the fake video, the voices, the curated disclosure, is loose in the world all at once, scattered across 1,000 different hands. And you can't tell anymore at a glance whether the strange thing in the sky is real or just somebody's idea of a Tuesday. You don't need a Project Bluebeam to get a Bluebeam world. You just need a population that can't tell the difference. And whether or not Serge Monast ever understood what he was looking at, that is the part he got right. And here's where I'll leave it. The next time a light shows up where it shouldn't, or a face turns up in the clouds, or a folder full of long buried files lands in your lap right on schedule, do the one thing that Serge Monast never quite managed. Ask who's holding the projector, and ask why they're showing it to you right now. If you want to see what happens when the people who know those secrets start disappearing, I pulled that whole thread apart in another episode, and you can watch it right here. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.